the let's recap a little bit about what John went over last week. It was basically the introduction to the book, 12 ordinary men that ended up living extraordinary lives. And John talked a little bit about, how they were called. There were 12. You remember why there were 12? The 12 apostles.
12 tribes.
12 tribes. That's right. And we found you find later that they will eventually judge the 12 tribes of Israel, those 12 apostles. So we also learned a little bit about the difference between a disciple and an apostle. My oldest son bought a book recently, started reading it by R.C. Sproul, The Righteous Shall Live by Faith. It's basically it's a study of Romans. And he and I are going through it together. He's a little ahead of me, but I really recommend it. It's written in a great form. It's written like John preaches, where they have the scripture, and then they break down the scripture and with commentary. And Sproul's he's really good. He passed away in 2017, the 500th anniversary of Luther, and almost an appropriate time for somebody that's such a hero of the Reformed faith. So, but on page 3 of this book, and of course Paul wrote Romans, but Paul makes a significant affirmation about himself and his mission, called to be an apostle. In the early chapters of Acts, the church gathered to elect a new apostle, and it set forth the criteria for apostleship. The first criteria was having been a disciple of Jesus during his earthly ministry. The second was having seen or been an eyewitness of the resurrection. And the third and most important criteria was having been directly and immediately called by Jesus. And, he goes on to mention that Paul really, the last one is, I think you could argue the second one, because he saw the resurrected Christ. But Sproul goes on to talk about that on one occasion Jesus sent out 70 disciples. There were far more disciples than the 12. Not all who were disciples became apostles. We tend to use those words interchangeably, as if 12 disciples and 12 apostles must mean the same thing. But a disciple is simply a learner or student. Jesus was a rabbi, and enrolled in his school were many disciples. From out of that group, he chose 12 to be elevated to the rank of apostle, who were commissioned to speak for the master. In the ancient world, an apostle was like an ambassador who spoke on behalf of the king. So, yes, Wayne.
What point in his ministry did he become a rabbi, and how did he achieve that in the organization that was so awesome?
Rabbi was just a word for teacher. So he was a teacher. That's why he was a rabbi. He was teaching the scriptures. And he knew the scriptures because he wrote the scriptures. So, in the beginning was the Word, okay? I mean, it was, there was nobody better to be qualified to be a rabbi. They had, I'm sure, some kind of criteria. They had different rabbis that were better thought of than other rabbis. Paul studied under Gamaliel, who was, one of the better thought of. He was a wise man. He was the one that advised the Jews that, leave them alone. If it's of God, you're messing around with the wrong person. If it's of man, it'll go away. And he cited a couple of instances. So I hope that answers your question. So, yeah. And what was the other part? Was you another part of that question? Or?
Was his title of rabbi recognized by the Sadducees as well as the Pharisees?
I would say no.
I think, Ron, what you said was right.
Yeah.
In the sense that maybe the modern distinction would be if you want to be a professor at Harvard, that's like a recognized, you got degrees, they hired you, etc. teacher in the sense that you're one that teaches. It's not a, you're not hired to do it or, yeah, it's not an organization. That's the right way to think about it, yeah. But Ron's right, it's like there are teachers that are better thought of than others, regardless of where they teach or if
Right.
they teach somewhere, right?
Yeah, and we have a modern day, you know, you're looking at what 2,000 years ago, what they were saying. Modern day, a rabbi would be someone like John that has some type of a divinity degree or a degree in religion from, and that the rabbi at the temple in Mobile is, you know, a highly educated person, and you know.
I guess explain maybe one other thing. If
Yeah.
we do see Jesus, how old is Jesus when he goes to the temple? We see that story.
12,
12, something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So he's already sitting there with the rabbis and such, and he's going back and forth. And I don't think it's, well, it's the account in which we read, we learn, right? So there is that educational component, I think.
So we get to today's study, which is half of the book, half of the chapter on Peter. What was the title of this? Anybody remember what the title of the chapter was?
Man with a foot-shaped mouth.
A man with a foot-shaped mouth. What,
Apostle.
I love at one point that MacArthur says that his mouth gets in gear while his brain is still idle. And how many times have we done that? Huh? So, yeah, I think that was something else. So, you know, he started this chapter out with talking about how, you know, the ones that were called and how they're listed. They're a total of 12, and they are listed in the three synoptic gospels as well as the book of Acts. And they are basically in the same order. One thing is consistent in all of them is that Peter was the very first one. Peter was listed first. And the first four, where you've got Peter, Andrew, his brother, James, and John, who also were brothers. So the first four, not only were they friends, they were business associates. They were in the fishing business together. They owned boats. And the two brothers, Peter and Andrew, were born in Bethsaida, and they also think that Philip was born there, which was a small fishing village on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. And if you remember from our geography lesson when we were doing the Joshua story, that the Sea of Galilee is in the north, the Dead Sea is in the south, and it's connected by the Jordan River, which is the Jordan Valley. So Jesus was from Galilee, from Nazareth of Galilee, which is the northern part, and where they were, the two main cities were Bethsaida, where they were born. Three of them were born, and then they moved to Capernaum, and Capernaum was kind of the headquarter areas for Jesus. And it was kind of interesting that Christ cursed both of those cities for their disbelief. So, yeah. And it was also interesting that in the next set of the disciples, I think in the second one, Philip was. You had one. Philip, I think, was named first in all of them, and then there were different orders. There also were some different names. I mean, known as, you know, you saw Bartholomew, also known as Nathaniel. You know, I thought about that. There's a lot about naming in here, because we get to the point of where Christ, gives Peter a nickname, Simon. It's Simon. It's not Peter. But when he gives Simon a nickname, and my dad worked at Lockheed, and his name was Arthur Ewell Scott, and he was known to the family Ewell. At work, they called him AE or Scotty. I mean, people use different, names to identify people. And sometimes you'll see in the Bible also known or something, a reference. It's kind of no different than it is, than it is to us. So when Jesus called the disciples, if someone would look up Mark 1 and read 16 through 20 for me.
Passing along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were in their boat mending the nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him.
See you, Dad.
Do what?
See you, Dad.
Yeah, see you, Dad. Yeah. What would your conversation be like, John, if you'd done that? So, yeah, left Dad with boats and
There's worse places you could be left, I suppose.
yeah. The calling is interesting, no doubt about it. Another description of the calling is in Luke 5:2 through 11. If someone could look that up real quick.
And he saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him.
What do you think Peter's attitude was there when Christ said, "Let your nets down over here"? Yeah,
Okay, preacher.
Whatever.
yeah, if you insist. I don't. Okay,
Well, all right then.
that's right. We had that discussion about gifts have already been, that's right. So I don't know what that was, but it was certainly an accident. So at some point, Simon is referred to by his full name. Do you know what his name was? Simon Bar Jonah. And John, what does the bar mean? Son of, right. So he was the son of Jonah, which is also known as spelled Jona, and it's also referred to as John. So when you see he is referred to as Simon, son of John or Jonah, it's the same thing. So I've got a friend that I said my father's name was A.E. I got a friend occasionally will refer to me as, "Hey, Ron, son of A.E." And it's kind of cool because it's, kind of biblical in a way. There's hope for my friend. So yeah, amen, hope for me. At this point, we see that Jesus gives Simon a new name. Why does he give him a new name? It's a nickname, basically.
Because there are 2 Simons.
There are 2 Simons, okay? What do you mean by that, John?
Simon and Zealot.
But
That's purely
so you think secular reason there was more than one Simon? Okay. But he continues to call him Simon throughout the scriptures. Why is that? When he's mad at him, okay. Or when he wants to instruct him.
It's like your mom using your middle name.
Yeah,
Full
yeah,
name, yeah.
right.
Well, he proclaimed Jesus as the Christ, Son of the living God.
And he was praised for that. Yeah. And then almost immediately
He was saved.
he was saved. And so I thought that's what you meant by there were two Simons, because there was a good Simon and a bad Simon. MacArthur points out that Simon was a common name. There were 7 of them in the Gospels alone, and he mentioned them. But I liked one of the things MacArthur did. He said that, Jesus had changed Peter's name because Peter was not a rock. He was the opposite of a rock. He was basically, we'd probably call him flaky or, inconsistent, or he calls him what?
Political activist.
Well,
No, that's
that was Simon the Zealot, yeah. But Simon Peter we were talking about was,
So were both of these characters at the same location, same time?
Yes.
yes, yeah,
They were both disciples,
yeah.
or both apostles.
Along with, what's the one, Matthew.
Right.
Be on the other end of the political spectrum.
Right. Yeah, he contrasts Simon the Zealot and Matthew, because the Zealots were known to have daggers, curved daggers underneath their cloaks or their robes, and they were terrorists, and in public places they would assassinate people. They would just cut them, and then disappear in the crowd, I would assume. But and targets would have been people like Matthew, or known as Levi also. That's another one of those. You see it Levi, you see it Matthew. Why would he have killed Matthew? What was that? Why a tax collector? And who did they collect taxes from, Gail?
From Jews, and he was working for the Romans.
He was collecting money so that they could fund the troops that were in Jerusalem, basically, or in Israel, and so that's. We talked about taxation without representation. This was, I think, yeah, this is worse. Although I think England probably wanted to do the same thing, basically. So, he's named 2 different things. He's named Peter, and he's also named Cephas. What's the difference?
One's Aramaic.
Which one's Aramaic, John? Cephas, yeah. And they both mean what? Rock or stone, right? So, and who else does Jesus give a nickname to? They're brothers.
Sons of Thunder,
Sons of Thunder, right, yeah.
James and John.
That's right. The sons of Zebedee, and he calls them sons of thunder. And there's a word that starts with a B that I couldn't pronounce, but both.
Where are you getting, I didn't remember reading that.
It's there.
I don't remember him mentioning,
Ron's a very wise man. He reads a lot.
Yeah, I may have read it someplace else. That's very possible.
it's in here, but
Yeah,
it's true nonetheless.
yeah, yeah. No, no, not the fish, but
The word you couldn't pronounce.
yeah, the word I couldn't pronounce, but I think it was not in here. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. So, but it was interesting that Peter wasn't the only one that, Jesus gave a nickname to. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Jesus nicknaming Peter the Rock, that can go both ways. You said stone or rock, and you could say he's dumber than a box of rocks.
not on sand, but on rock. So,
He was dumber than a box of rocks, though, so
Sometimes.
come out of here, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no more than the rest of us.
that's true too.
It also, you know,
Boanerges.
Boanerges, okay. Thank goodness for Google.
I know, right?
That's right. Dr. Google, we call it, I think it's, that kind of went brain dead for where we were going with that,
We
but
were just talking about nicknames.
yeah. The part of Paul, I mean, of Peter being, you know, when they mentioned his name Simon, and it says when Jesus called him Simon, it's normally when he was rebuking him or when he was trying to correct him. But also it says that it's the name Simon is used just to identify Peter's things, like Simon's mother-in-law. That had just a secular reference. Simon's house, Simon's boat. So it wasn't always in a negative form. Yes, John?
You know, also, these nicknames, they speak of an intimacy that Jesus had with these four. It just, when you're nicknaming somebody, there's an intimacy there that is perhaps not the same with some of the others.
Well, and I guess the nicknames are all in that first group, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're not in the other two. That's interesting.
And he talked about the fact that it was the first group was much more intimate with Jesus than the other ones. And he also said that if Jesus in perfect humanity had trouble pouring himself out to 12, you know, how much more, you know, problem would we have? So, you know, and I thought about this lesson, and we're studying about ordinary men, and we're supposed to take something so that we could take it to our lives, so that, and we, guys, I don't want to embarrass y'all, but y'all are ordinary. And I am the ordinariest of all. But I thought, what would Jesus name me? I mean, what kind of nickname would he give you, John? Or, yeah. I'm thinking you, John. What would Jesus nickname you, John? Is what I want. That's where we're supposed to take this. That's what we're taking away from it today.
That's when you say get behind me.
That's, yeah, get behind me, Satan. That's it. Yeah.
Do you think
But-
Jesus had the same kind of relationship with those four that we just have here with this interaction?
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Even
So-
they referred to themselves as the ones who Jesus loved.
So expanding
They
the
felt
intimacy theory, I think what we don't realize is that Jesus knew about these four even before they realized what was going on.
Oh, sure.
He knew the potential that they had, and that's what he was building on.
He created their potential in their mother's womb. I mean, and MacArthur points out that he says as a leader, and he gets into the leadership of Peter. Is a leader born or is a leader made? And he comes to the conclusion both, that there's you need certain attributes. He identifies three in good Presbyterian form. I guess he all had to kind of struggle to find 3 I words, but
He's a good preacher.
yeah, he's a good preacher. That's exactly right. But he identified three different attributes that Peter had. Does somebody remember what those were?
Inquisitiveness, initiative, and involvement.
Right. I think the involvement was the one that I thought he had to struggle a little bit, but yeah, he was struggling a little bit there. Certainly Peter had initiative.
It's three of them, actually, 40 through 42. The only reason I had it, because I underlined those three with yellow.
I think it's interesting that Peter was impetuous, impulsive, and overeager. And somehow he got molded into the other two guys.
But down at the bottom of 43, it says, now it was up to the Lord to train and shape them. So
Yeah.
they had those qualities, and that's what he was looking for, but then he had to shape them.
And he also pointed out that when they list the Greek word they use to be first doesn't mean chronologically, it means the most important. And so Peter was that. And I got a kick out of, MacArthur, I think it was MacArthur. I read so much stuff, I'm not sure anymore. But in the first 12 books of Acts, and there are only 28 books in Acts, and the first 12, Peter and John are constant. I think chapter 9 is the calling of Paul or Saul, but they're constantly together, yet John never speaks. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that's why God loved him, Jesus loved him the most. He was the one he liked, because he kept his mouth shut and was listening. So, that was just a crazy thought that I had. But, because John refers to himself, I always thought there was a little bit, arrogant, to say the one that Jesus loved and referring to, yeah, right. And so.
And is he the one, I forget, is he the one that also said that he got to the tomb first?
Yes, yeah. Well, they were competitive.
I told John Foster this morning, I was struck by when MacArthur says that Peter's name is mentioned more than any other name in the Gospels except Jesus. And I said, every teacher has had the experience of having that kid in their class, that they call their name more than anybody else's, and it's not because they're the best kid.
Right, no, yeah. Yeah, I had highlighted that to read, Peter's name is mentioned in the gospel more than any other except Jesus. No one speaks as often as Peter, and no one is spoken to by the Lord as often as Peter. No disciple is so frequently rebuked by the Lord as Peter. No disciple ever rebukes the Lord except Peter. No one else confessed Christ more boldly or acknowledged his lordship more explicitly, yet no other disciple verbally denied Christ as forcefully as publicly as Peter did. No one is praised and blessed by Christ the way Peter was, yet Peter was also the only one Christ ever addressed as Satan. So,
He's got highs and lows.
yeah, the Lord had harsher things to say to Peter than he ever had to say to the others. But I made a note over here that about leadership and he talked about Peter being molded through certain hardships. And I heard an interview with Cooper Manning. I don't know if y'all know who he is or not. It's Eli and Peyton Manning's older brother. And he's the father of this phenom quarterback named Arch Manning, who's at Texas. And he went there as the most highly, sought after football player in the country. And basically the first 2 years he sat on the bench. He's played some, but really sat on the bench. And I heard his father interviewed by Dan Patrick, and he said, did y'all think about transferring? I mean, in today's world, a player doesn't play, they go someplace else. I mean, this transfer portal, that's all we hear about. And he said, no, he said, we didn't. He said, there are going to be some hard times in his life, and you need to learn to experience those. So that's good parenting, in my opinion. So you got to let your kids occasionally suffer some of the pain so that they are prepared for what's out there, because it's not always, roses. I remember when I was on the nominating committee when we called John. I don't think this church would have called someone right out of seminary if John's father hadn't been a pastor. Because sometimes being a pastor can be a full contact sport. Have you ever been around church? Yeah. And he has experienced it, so I think that was he knows, there are a lot of your classmates from seminary that did not know that, and the real world slapped them in the face, so for sure. Yes, John.
One of the things that I thought was really poignant in reading was after Jesus met them on the seashore, after he rose and
Fixed breakfast. Yeah.
fixed breakfast.
Yeah. I love that.
And he
I love that
asked
vision.
do you love me 3 times?
Right.
This is after Peter has denied him
3 times. Yeah.
It's so human, an interaction it's also has divine dimensions to it as well. It's just powerful.
Right.
And a good teacher will do that as well.
That's right.
A really good teacher.
And Ron, to pick up on Peter's epic success and epic failures, I think it's good for us as a church to remember we got to give church leaders of all stripes, especially new ones like Peter, room to epically fail. And then figure out, John Chapman, how do we pick them back up? Not slap them on the wrist, but like they know they messed up. Like, yeah, that wasn't good. How do we pick you back up and let's go again?
Yeah.
Because if you don't end up with Peter's of the world, right? They just quit.
Yeah.
That's it.
And Christ doesn't say, do you believe me,
That's
Peter?
right.
Or do you follow me? He said, do you love me?
Yeah.
And that's what, we have to, that's what we have to emulate as well. It's people are gonna fall down and make us mad and things like that, but if we love them, then all the other things can fall into place.
Yeah, that's right. It's good, Ron.
And also, I think I read in this part that wasn't Peter the only one that followed Jesus through all of this, everywhere that he went?
Except
Oh, John did also?
Yeah, John went with him to the when Judas betrayed him. John was there, and I had to reread because I remember Peter denying Christ, but I didn't remember him cursing. But he swore an oath, I guess, or a curse, and said, "No, that it wasn't just a denial. It was."
He was saving his own body at that
Yeah.
point, not his soul. He was saving the human
Yeah.
body from the crowd, and I've always thought the two distinctions there, body and what Christ could do for him.
I also don't remember scripturally, and I guess I didn't get a chance to look this up, but it mentioned that the Roman soldiers that were coming there were coming from a fort. Do y'all remember that fort being named? I don't either, but MacArthur mentions a fort, and he calls it by name. And he also mentioned that typically that there would have been as many as 600 soldiers in that one particular place. So there were hundreds of Roman soldiers when Peter pulls out the sword and cuts the chief priest's ear off, and then Jesus, of course, heals him and tells Peter. MacArthur took a little license here saying that was divine justification for the death penalty. Did y'all see that? Did you notice? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
Put
had,
that in Genesis. We don't need it in the gospel.
yeah, that's what, yeah.
I also was telling John this morning that I like that MacArthur pointed out, we tend to think of those stumbles of Peter and not what came before, like Peter took his eyes off Jesus and sank.
Right.
But you didn't see anybody else getting out of the boat in the first place
No.
to attempt to walk on the water. And Peter denied Christ in the courtyard of the high priest, but most of the other apostles didn't even make it that far. So he, once again, he goes after things brashly and then stops and goes, wait a minute.
He also points out, though, that within a few weeks from this episode, Peter is preaching at Pentecost, and he is the one that's preaching. And thousands, come to the Lord, and, and he has the Holy Spirit now. Now, is Peter perfect from this point on? No.
I think that goes back to the big paragraph on page 39 about the raw material.
Uh-huh.
Peter's a strong argument for the belief that leaders are born with certain innate traits, but must be properly shaped and made true to into a true leader. And I think the theme of that whole thing is the good Lord can take anybody of any situation if they faith and of a mustard seed. He can transform that individual into a powerful force that nobody else can condense it.
You're right, yeah.
That's the whole message of this whole chapter. I think Peter, yeah, the book. But I mean, Peter the man is just an example of what can be achieved given the right set of circumstances.
Which even you and I can do. I mean, that's the whole story of the book. Yeah, so.
I think all these examples we're citing of the events and what we think is a good thing is the summation of all of them. You can take somebody with innate gifts and with proper
Steering.
yeah, with proper steering, you can make them into a phenomenal person.
But they're still a man.
But they're so many.
They still have their faults.
You know, and you were saying it was Peter, the only one that was around. You know, John and James also. I mean, they were the three that were the closest. I mean, they were there. They were there in the Garden of Gethsemane. They were there on the Mount, the Transfiguration. You know, they were.
Talking about when they were taken in trial, the trial part.
Okay.
They were taken in places like that, from trying to get the trial done. Was Peter the only one that followed him in
think-
all those places?
I
and
think
John.
Peter and John.
And
Yeah, and John. Right. Yeah.
John just didn't talk.
Yeah.
She said it.
Yeah.
You just don't know that much about
Yeah.
John because he didn't say anything.
Yeah. John wrote, though. Yeah, John wrote. Any other questions? Think about what Christ would nickname you. I mean,
Jesus, John. Jesus is
that's right.
yourself.
That's right. Not what John would nickname me. Okay.
Look up what the Aramaic is for
I'd
wild
say
child.
mine would be meathead.
He said, hey, man.
Richard. Jackie said she's looking up Aramaic for a wild child. John, would you close us?